caused by treatments such as glucocorticoids. Primary causes of admission: disease flares. Most were mild or moderate, but not severe. The main clinical manifestation of flares were constitutional symptoms, followed by renal, articular, and mucocutaneous involvement, with ceratosis and neuropsychiatric involvement standing as less common manifestations. Infection is another primary cause for admission. We're talking about respiratory infections, gastrointestinal infections, and urinary infections. Please note, previous studies showed that the most common serious infections were pneumonia. For 25 to 50% of cases, followed by sepsis, skin infections, and nephritis. Hospital stays. The median length of stay is 6 days, which was consistent with previous years. Fewer SLE patients are being admitted to an ICU. Patients admitted to an ICU had higher disease levels, a higher percentage of renal involvement, and especially more significant presence of ceratosis and neuropsychiatric involvement. 53.4% of patients required more than one hospitalization, which is consistent with previous reports of 31.1. Now, readmissions at 30 days occurred in 5.8% of admissions, a lower value than previously described. Longer disease duration seemed to be associated with reduced readmission risks, which suggests that flares occur mainly earlier in the course of the disease. Thrombocytopenia and renal involvement were associated with readmission. Now, ICU admissions due to flare were largely associated with greater severity of the clinical presentation, higher SLEDAI. You remember, I spoke about SLEDAI in previous episodes. Higher percentage of renal involvement and especially more significant presence of ceratosis and neuropsychiatric involvement. APS and longer length of stay were associated with need of ICU care. APS is associated with catastrophic APS, thrombotic microangiopathy, nephropathy, and major thrombosis. Now, I have been admitted into the hospital. I have stayed in the hospital from Thanksgiving 2 New Year's. So that was a long hospital stay. So stay with me, and I'll have more on this topic. He is the author of Positive Energy 24/7 and his latest book, It Was Destined, Urban Legend. He's Detroit's own author, Henry Long. To purchase an autographed copy of his book and to purchase his ebook, go to readmitted.com. That's WRITEPATH247.com. You can also follow him on Instagram at RightPath247. Abundant Harvest Aquaponics, planting seeds to grow food and creating opportunities for people and families. You can contact this nonprofit organization at www.abundantharvestaquaponics.org. Immunosuppressant use and hospitalizations in adult patients with systemic lupus erythematosus, admitted to a Tri-Terry Academic Medical Center. Information was retrieved from BMJ Journals, June 2018, Volume 5, Issue Number 1. We know that SLE is an autoimmune disease with an estimated prevalence ranging from 40 to 150 cases per 100,000 individuals in the USA. In fact, SLE and other connective tissue diseases have been ranked the 6 most likely conditions to result in 30-day readmission to the hospital, with an estimated 16.5% to 27.2% of patients requiring readmission. Traditionally, SLE has been treated with corticosteroids, which are known to promote infections, hyperglycemia, hypertension, osteoporosis, and avascular necrosis, among other adverse effects. Over the past few decades, new medications with different side effects profiles have been developed or have been reproposed for SLE. For instance, hydroxychloroquine, better known as Plaquenil, usage patterns may have changed in recent years due to emerging evidence suggesting damage prevention and or efficacy. However, few studies have examined whether changes in hospitalization outcomes may correlate with treatment patterns. To address this gap, a pilot study at an academic medical center to examine SLE hospitalizations and changes in medication use between 2005 and 2013. As I stated, this study is really long, and the information will be placed on the My Story Living with Lupus website. Patients with SLE were identified by queuing the UCSD hospitalization databases for records containing one or more billing codes for SLE. The year 2013 was chosen as the end date of the study so that the ICD-9 diagnosis and procedure codes would be used at both time points. During the project planning stages, ICD-10 CM implementation was planned to be required by October 2014. I will have this information up for you, but it gives another side to why we as patients are hospitalized. Well, it's that time for me to go. I really do need to get some rest. But I want to leave you with this before I go. It's about living life and life lessons. Be like a tree. Let the dead leaves drop. Some of life's best lessons are learned at the worst times. Do good, and good will come to you. Some people come in our life as a blessing. Others come in our life as a lesson. Good times become good memories, and bad times become good lessons. You may say, my life, my choice, my mistakes, my lessons. But you need to enjoy the little things in life, because one day you will look back and realize they were the big things. But most importantly, know that the greater your storm, the brighter your rainbow. I'm Susan Hendricks, your host for My Story Living with Lupus. Have a peaceful, enjoyable weekend. And you know what? Be like a tree and let the dead leaves drop. I'll see you next week. The views and opinions expressed on My Story Living with Lupus podcast represents each person's individual experience. By listening to this podcast or reading our blog, you agree not to use this podcast or blog as medical advice to treat any medical condition in either yourself or others. As always, consult your own physician for any medical issues that you may be having. My Story Living with Lupus podcast is officially trademarked, all rights reserved.
The podcast you just heard